Thank you for joining this short video on how to use the simplified QBR tool designed for sales in Canada to create quarterly business review packages for managed print clients with under 50 assets. There's support you can get for larger accounts with 50 plus assets. This is designed for the smaller ones where really it's a self-serve model. The one thing to keep in mind is this tool works with the clients we're selling out of our current managed print offering and the one we've been selling for a couple of years that bills out of the Laser Networks eAutomate back office. There are also a small number of accounts out there that are in a legacy XPS or Xerox print services offering. The reporting for those accounts comes out of a different system and isn't designed for use within this tool. To populate the tool with all the information you'll need for your review, you need 3 reports. The service call history report, which gives you all of the service information. The asset summary report, which gives you a list of all of the assets that are in scope of the managed print engagement. And the contract billing meters report, which gives all of your volume information. Now, where do you get these reports? So depending on where you are in Canada, Western Ontario or Quebec and Atlantic, there's a link here to the 3 different delivery leads that manage that part of the country. So if you send them an email requesting these 3 reports, and if you click on this link, it will open up an email note within Outlook for you, partially populated with the account or with the report names. You just have to populate what account do you want it for and what time window. So do you want to see ABC Company for the last 3 months, 6 months, year? You have to give them that piece of information so they know how far back to run the reports for. Once you get those reports back in email, save them to your computer somewhere, and you can use the 4 buttons below to populate all of that information into the tool. So you have to do them in order. So I'll start with step 1. I'll import the service call history report. So select the button. Find where on your computer you store them. Mine just happened to be on my desktop. I'm going to pick the service call history report and say open. Your screen's going to flash for a second. It will import all that information. I'm going to do the same for the other 2 reports. So the asset summary report, double click on it, your screen will flash it as imports it, and finally the billing report. Double click on it, and all of the information has now been populated into the report, and then step 4, press the button which will go in. You'll see your screen flash for a minute. What it's doing is it's refreshing all of the graphics and the tables within the report. So that's all you need to do to populate the tool. The last thing I'll caution on this slide is this is not something we should populate and send an email to the customer saying, here's your report for this month. That doesn't do really anyone any good. The whole point is that the content from this tool will be populated into the PowerPoint slide deck I'll show you after, and go in and have a conversation with the client. This is how your fleet is operating. Ask some questions about how we can improve it, and identify the next items we could be working on with the client to help drive more value over time. That's the whole point of a QBR and the value of the QBR, so sending them the information doesn't achieve that. If you ever want to see the data that's been imported, if you look far to the right, there is an orange tab that's name corresponds to each of the reports. That's where all the data was imported to. As you can see, it's just flat data, so you won't get a whole lot out of it, but if you ever want to see it, it is there. Where you will spend most of your time is on the purple tabs and the blue tabs. The purple tabs are the asset information and the volume. The blue tabs are the service information. There's two blue, 4 purple. So I will go through the asset information first. So if you take a look at this report, there's 2 tabs on this chart and 1 graphic I'll show you in a moment. The left-hand chart is broken out by location. So if the customer only has 1 location under management, you'll just see 1 address. If they have a bunch, you'll see them broken out like this one is by multiple addresses. You'll get a list of all of the makes and models we have under management, the age of that model. Now, it's not the age of that particular machine, it's how long that model has been on the market, and how many of that model does the customer have at that location. If you look at the right, you'll see the same information just cut a different way. This is not by location, this is by model, so you can see what model does the customer have, what addresses are they at, what's the model age, and this last column is what is the total meter count on that machine. So really what you're looking at here is to say, does the customer have machines that they are running really high volume on? So the two things that you're really looking at are the parts of the client's fleet that are aged. So if you take a look at the average model age, you'll see this one, the customer has a machine that's 18, the model was actively sold 18 years ago, this one 15 years ago, one relatively new at 3 years ago. But are there a high number of devices that are really old that are going to become problematic? Or are there devices that have really high meter counts? Sometimes you will see devices that have 1 million plus impressions on them. So what you're really looking at here that says, are there any old devices or high meter count devices that we should either replace, or perhaps they have a low volume machine that we can move and swap with that other one to carry the load much better. So it's about optimizing the client's fleet. So these two tabs give you that piece of information. If you come all the way over to the right, there's a chart, and again, a lot of these charts are designed to be cut and paste into the PowerPoint document that says by manufacturer, what does the customer's fleet look like? So if you take a look at this one, they've got a large number of HPs in the purple, they have a large number of Xeroxes in the blue, and they have a couple of brothers and then at least one other device that fits outside of those models, because our offering predominantly is Xerox, HP, Lexmark, Dell, brother. So you can get a sense for how complicated is the customer's fleet, because as you'll see on the next couple of tabs, the more different models a customer has to manage, the more cost there is to managing it. They have to have supplies, service contracts, their IT has to know how to support them, they have to load print drivers. So if you take a look at this account, you'll see they have a huge number. I'm looking down this column G, the right-hand column. They have a huge number of models under management. So could we help them slim that down? And to have that conversation about do they really need that many different models, kind of start to dig into the volume information. So volume is cut multiple ways, kind of to tell the whole story. One, how does their volume trend? So if you look at total, all of their volume, this is broken out by the last couple of quarters. What is their color volume? Their black and white prints, they print on color machines, and then the black and white prints, they print on black and white machines. So you can get a sense for this customer, their volume is flat to slightly reducing. Color is super flat, so you're not seeing any increase in color volume. You're not seeing a large decrease in overall print volume. So it gives you a good sense that says things are relatively stable as a whole. It's a good, if the print volume is increasing or decreasing, that's when we should be asking questions about, are there trends in the client's business that's driving that? Is their business increasing or decreasing, and could that help explain it? It's all about understanding why. The next step, other than at a macro level, is you want to take it down one more level and say, what's their print look like by location? Typically, volume is directly tied to the number of people working in that location in a lot of cases. But what you're looking for here is, are there any sites that are out of whack with what you could expect given the size and type of work done at those locations? So sometimes when you look at these charts, you'll see a color volume at one location that is out of whack from the others. It's higher than it should be. So the questions need to be asked about why. Is it because marketing is at that location and they print a lot of color? Or could it be something else that's driving it? But really it's just helping you get inside what is the volume like by location, so you can drill into the, if print is going up or down, is it coming out of one site or is it pretty balanced? After you look at it by location, a lot of people like to look at it by model. Now at first glance this is a bit of an eye chart, but they're actually quite simple to read. Sometimes when you look at these charts, there'll only be 5 or 6 models because the customer's done a really good job of consolidating their fleet to a handful of models. When you look at this customer, however, they have a huge number of models that they're currently using, and you'll see that the actual print volume used across them tails off very, very quickly, almost to nothing. So we should be having the conversation with the customer about, is your print going to the lowest cost device? What is it costing you to support all of those different models? And given that so many of these models have very, very little volume, could we put in one new device to take the load off of those multiple models, perhaps in this case a 7855, which they already do a lot of volume on, consolidate it to a device they already support? Or could we just simply take that volume and move it to existing devices and over time optimize that client to whittle away at the number of models they have supporting? The last chart, and this isn't one a lot of folks or everyone will use, this breaks out your volume by machine, so by serial number. This is a rather large chart, but it lets you look at it to say by serial number, model, and location, what's the total volume across in that time period across every one of the machines. So really what it lets you do is say, are there any devices I'm running really high volumes on? And if you scroll way down to the bottom, you'll see that there's devices they have that they are running almost no volume on. So it allows you to have that conversation more intelligently for those types of clients who really like to drill into the details. Where am I printing on these devices and where am I not? So if you look at those purple charts, you get what do I have for devices and kind of a breakdown of my fleet. What's my volume like by total and by site? Break it out by models so you can see how complicated their environment is. And lastly, break it out by serial number so you can see really at a machine level, you can drill into the details. After that, you get into how is the device performing service-wise. First thing you're going to look at here is the trend in total service calls. So you can see this client had a bit of an uptick, but since then things have normalized and are trending downwards. When you look at the chart, you can see by serial number, model, and location, how many calls did they have in that time window, and what was our average time to resolve that problem. Really what you're looking at is, are there any devices that have had a high number? If you take a look at this one, this brother machine has had 4 calls in the time window of this report. So how are we doing? We're getting resolved relatively quickly, but that's a high number of calls. You're also looking to say, is service increasing or decreasing? Are there problems with the fleet we should be looking at? So this gives you the overall trend, and are there any problem machines you should really start to target? But the next question that always gets asked invariably is, okay, what were those 4 calls about? Is there a pattern? So if you come over here to the reasons for service tab, the last tab in this, just find that device. So by serial number, it's this device here down on row 21. And you'll see there was a number of calls. Not feeding paper, not feeding paper, not feeding paper, and then an image quality issue. So over a 2-month span, they had a whole bunch of issues with paper feed and then pale copies. But it's been 6 months since we did these calls. So this is one where we should be saying we're going to monitor this machine, see if we have any continued issues, or do we need to look at it, or did we get it? But it's kind of the vein of that conversation because all of the different calls are broken up, and this reason description is what the customer told us when they called in, so it really is the customer's verbatim for what's going on. So this lets you get at, are there any devices having multiple calls? Why are they calling in? And are there any patterns that tie back to, as we were looking in volume, the age of the machine or the meter counts that could help explain those issues? Because as machines get older with higher volumes, they start to break down. So this is the data side of what's in a quarterly business review. But as I mentioned in the beginning, that's only half of it. There's a PowerPoint document that you really should be populating to go with it. It's going to look like what a standard business review package is and give you some guidance into the talk track, although you can customize these for each client based on their requirements using whatever data elements in the Excel document make sense. So your standard things like an agenda, what's the objectives of the meeting, and then you get into just cutting and pasting data out of the Excel document into here on the appropriate slide. So most customers like to see a review of their assets, cut and paste that Excel information into here. These yellow boxes are guidance for you in a general QBR. These are the types of things to talk about, and this is the type of information to put here. The yellow boxes should be deleted prior to finalizing this and presenting it to the client, but it's what we reviewed on the previous document. Assets, volumes, volume by location, so it's all the same things. The next part of the QBR, after you put that data in and have that conversation, is what's next for the client. And that's when you get into future innovations. For the future innovations part of this presentation, really what you're trying to do is have the conversation with the client about how do we move them up the MPS continuum so they see more and more value over the life of the contract. Part of the MPS value proposition is we help the customer evolve over time, at initially helping them have less equipment and less complexity and help them print for less money. As we move them up the curve, the goal is to have them print less altogether by helping them with workflow solutions and things like that. So this is where we should be having the conversation, and this is really the sales conversation to say, okay, have we optimized your fleet? Have we brought you down to the right number of models, taken the complexity out, really helped with any sustainability? Okay, but maybe this customer had really high color volume, and in the whole conversation, we couldn't explain why their color volume was increasing. Perhaps we should be talking to them about a print tracking solution and analytics to help them understand why is their print increasing, what department or what user is it coming from, and can we control it in some way. That's perhaps the most common next conversation about volume is once you understand the volume, can you dig in right down to the user level to understand why? Once you get by mobility, print tracking, and things like that, then you really can move up the stack even more to start talking about how do we help them not print at all. Workflow automation to take the paper out, content management solutions to give them places to store all this information digitally, which really always ties back to mobility, because if you're a mobile worker, working with paper is always tough. So where can we bring the customer along the continuum that makes sense given the size of the customer and the type of work they do? So that's the next conversation. And you'll sometimes bring in other slides into this deck from the product teams to say perhaps this offering makes sense or this one doesn't. Bring those in as you see fit to kind of augment this conversation. The last two slides that are part of the standard deck are really, once you've had this conversation about where you want to take them, get it recorded as this is the objective we're trying to solve. This is the sponsor, and what are the next steps? So if the objective is to understand where print is coming or the color print is coming from so that you can reduce it, that's your objective. Your sponsor will be nominated by the client to say this is who we will work with to do it, and these are the next steps. Capturing it this way really allows you to come back in your next quarterly business review or even sooner and push it with the client to really make sure they get that value and that we don't get lost in all of the other day-to-day things they're working on. And it gives you something that you can review in the next meeting to say, this is what we agreed to, this is who we were going to work with, these were our next steps, and what happened. And really the what happened comes into the next tab, accomplishments and contract status. So anytime you complete a project with a client, introduce a new offering, add that value, I find it's best to record it as a milestone, the value it drove for the client, and you could say it's either on target, it's issues, or at risk. Why are these here? Because you can record the stuff we did, that's great, so we have something we could continually refresh with the customer that we have done a lot for them. But if you decided in the last meeting we were going to implement this tracking solution, and then the sponsor gave somebody to work with and you're not getting anywhere. That person's too busy, you can't get what you need. You could throw that up as an issue because it's yellow or orange, it'll stand out, and it allows to have that next level conversation with the client about this is what we were going to do, this is where we're struggling, is it resources on our side or their side, and come to a conversation about how we're going to move it forward so you can break that logjam and really drive value for the client through the life of the engagement. That's what a standard small size QBR looks like. In the backup of this slide deck, there's two backup slides you can use as appropriate. One is a slide on the Xerox device agent. So there are some old clients that are not running it. This is the tool that lets us do proactive supply and meter reads. If a clients aren't running it, they really should be. So you can throw a slide in to have that conversation if they're one of the few that aren't. Or we also have Sentinel, which is a feedback tool we use where we send emails to users where they can very simply using, as you see, these happy and sad faces, give us feedback if they're happy, unhappy, or if they have a problem. This is a closed loop system that comes back to us. We'll look at the root cause of the issues and close the loop with the client. So if we roll this out to all our clients, but a lot of clients don't use it even though we're pinging them. This is something you could talk about as well as both a differentiator and where can we add value. So that's really the short video on how to create a QBR and how to have that conversation with a client. Good luck and have a good day.